Greetings! Today, we will talk about the atrocities and inhumanity of Ilse Koch, who worked in one of the concentration camps of the Third Reich. For what purposes ferocious animals were used against prisoners? Is it true that in the personal office of the warden kept items made of human skin, as well as the spirited heart of a Czech prisoner? How was the fate of the BUCHANWALD witch, and who visited her in the last years of life? Be sure to watch the video to the very end to learn all the shocking details of that period. From a simple accountant to a brutal warden, Ilse Koch, maiden name, was born in September 1906 in Dresden. In her character, the girl was cheerful, and those around her even called her an angel. At school, Ilse studied well, and after graduation decided to become an accountant. After that, the girl worked for some time in the library. To be honest, it is difficult to believe what happened next. And everything began after Hitler came to power and the establishment of the Nazi regime in Germany. First, Ilse becomes a member of the Führer's NSDAP party in 1932, membership number 13836. And 2 years later, she meets Karl Koch. And in 1936, the man becomes commandant in one of the concentration camps, Sachsenhausen. Ilse Koch, who became Karl's wife in 1937, shared all his endeavours. We draw your attention to the fact that the woman did become an accountant in the concentration camp. Ilse witnessed firsthand how her husband beat the prisoners. It wasn't just his fists. There were whips with razor blades attached to the ends. Apparently, at that moment, Ilse had something in her head, and she began to enjoy the suffering of the unfortunate. Then she and her husband were transferred in 1937 to another camp, BUCHANWALD. In this place, Ilse Koch transferred to the wardens to abuse the prisoners and put on them the most sophisticated experiments. For such cruelty, the woman received a well-known nickname, BUCHANWALD Witch. The atrocities still amaze to this day. Surprisingly, even the Germans themselves were amazed at the monstrous tortures of the BUCHANWALD witch. In the concentration camp, Ilse Koch seemed to feel complete freedom of action and impunity. At that time, she was like an authority. No one could prevent her either. And all because the prisoners under the established Nazi ideology for people were not considered. So, Ilse Koch started with elementary beatings with a whip. In fact, so did her husband. It is worth noting that sometimes the beating took place until the prisoner was half dead. Then, Ilse Koch decided to use animals in the fight. For starters, she got a German shepherd dog, which she set on the unfortunate. Especially pregnant women suffered in this regard. At the time of the attack of the animal, BUCHANWALD witch did not stop enjoying. Then, the cruelty took on a completely different character. Prisoners were taken to zoos with Himalayan bears. Finally, the woman came up with an unusual occupation. She decided to take up needlework, but not in the way you might imagine. The witch of BUCHANWALD was addicted to creating works out of human skin. Ilse Koch despised and hated prisoners with tattoos. This is why potential victims were soon being culled to further recycle their bodies. Many were so afraid of falling into the hands of the Nazi devil that they committed suicide. For example, prisoners used knives and other sharp objects to get rid of tattoos, while others tried to get into the gas chamber as quickly as possible. By the way, this type of torture was considered the fastest and painless in contrast to all the others. Soon, the BUCHANWALD witch began to turn the skins of prisoners into familiar objects. It is known that one of the human flesh was used to make tablecloths. Other remains of human bodies were used as Koch's personal items, gloves, underwear, and even lampshades. This is why Ilse Koch has another nickname, Frau Lampshade. Once, one of the prisoners seemed to recognize one of the prisoner's skin on Ilse's body. The distinguishing feature just became a tattoo from one of the murdered gypsies. Therefore, the personal belongings of the warden were often accompanied by special sketches. But what is most striking is the way the BUCHANWALD witch dealt with a Czech prisoner. The man was specially fattened before being sent to Ilse Koch. He was then taken to the warden's room for a one-on-one. As you can probably guess, the woman wanted to become intimate with the Czech. But the Czech refused. The latter's sad fate was instantly sealed. Not only was the prisoner brutally murdered, but on Koch's orders, his heart was cut out. This organ was then isolated, and the BUCHANWALD witch kept it as a memento and kept it in her private office. To distract herself from her daily routine, Koch wrote poetry and corresponded with other female guards. The woman shared all the details of her atrocities, and those in turn seemed to admire the exploits of the BUCHANWALD witch and set her as an example to others: the arrest of Ilse Koch. Of course, such atrocities and inhuman abuse could not continue indefinitely. The liberation of European countries from fascism happened time after time. Soon, the Soviet army entered Berlin, and that's when all the secrets of the Nazi regime began to be revealed. In 1945, the spouse of the BUCHANWALD witch was transferred from Buchenwald to Majdanek. This time, the commandant came under the scrutiny of the higher ranks. The man became the main accused and on several articles. The first was cruelty to prisoners. The second was embezzlement. Karl Koch was accused of embezzling 1 million marks, which was considered a serious crime at the time. The corrupter was sentenced to capital punishment, and in April 1945, the commandant was shot in Munich. As for Ilse Koch, she was arrested almost immediately after her spouse. But because of the lack of evidence, Frau Lampshade had to be released. In addition, the warden shortly before her arrest took care of her personal safety and hid all evidence of atrocities. But the escape from justice did not last long. Ilse had actively promoted peace over the years and did not support the politics of nationalism. Until in 1947, Koch was arrested again. This time, the prosecutors were Americans. Still managed to collect enough evidence and in the early 50s of the last century to sentence the woman to life imprisonment. The fate of the BUCHANWALD witch. Due to the fact that the BUCHANWALD witch had only 3 children, only one son kept in touch with his mother. It was he who visited Koch for the rest of the latter's life. Ilse, tormented by insomnia at night, soon went insane. More than once, she confessed that she saw in her dreams the souls of the dead concentration camp victims, which did not give her peace. Koch's imprisonment did not last long. September 1st, 1967, Frau Lampshade left her life of her own free will. A few years later, her son took his mother's maiden name, Köhler. Conclusion. Thus, Ilse Koch went down in history as one of the most brutal overseers of the Third Reich. Her elaborate fantasies and torture of prisoners are astonishing even after many decades. BUCHANWALD witch fully demonstrated what a person is capable of in conditions of impunity and permissiveness.